Welcome, everyone. We are Reven Concepts, and this is Coaching in Session, a podcast that's going to be bringing you all about mindset and a unique and different perspective, because we're going to be sharing some of the wisdom of life. And we're going to do that through guests, through articles, through blogs, through figuring out our own mindset, because what we have in our mind is going to be the key for our success, for our future. And we have to figure out, well, what is needed? What is necessary for us to make good in our life? We have what it takes. It's just that, do we know we have what it takes? Oftentimes people think that they're inadequate. They're always looking for something. That's why we give ourselves contingencies. We say we're going to do something and we wait until a certain time. Maybe today is the day, because today I'm going to be bringing on the founder of Single Seat Mindset, Dominic Teich, and talking about his experience with mindset. He's a fighter pilot who talks about the idea of being in the pilot seat, of having only a fraction of a second to make a choice. We live in a world where we have many seconds to make a choice, and oftentimes the choices we make can be reversed. So if you make a mistake, we can fix it. But there's going to be cases when we make a mistake and there's going to be no do-over. In life, there's no do-over. We get one life. And many people think, for some reason, that they have all of this life, that they're going to be able to redo life. Well, let's try to mitigate regret. But in order to do that, we have to understand mindset. So let's get into that interview with Dominic and myself and see how our current mindset is compared to what it takes to be a fighter pilot. Welcome, Dominic Teich, to the Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Michael.
So today I have you on as the founder of the Single Seat Mindset. And before I kind of go into what that is, I am going to allow you to kind of give your piece on that, because it's a very interesting topic. You're actually the first guest that I have that has a mindset like yourself. And it requires a certain type of individual to have your type of mindset. So today we're going to be diving into your mindset, the business that you have created, the work you've done, and then kind of relating that to everyday life for people. So in your own words, can you introduce yourself?
Yep. Single seat mindset is something that's kind of grown from a number of different things that have happened in my life, but it is a group of fighter pilots. And we've found that as we started this, and we can get to kind of what led to that later on, but we found that goal-oriented individuals, action takers, peak performers, they get kind of like us, right? We get frustrated when there's rigid structures and there's things getting in our way and there's no deliverable outcome. And you feel like you're just spinning your wheels, right? So what we found after I started a number of other businesses, as well as, I've been a civilian and military flight instructor for over 20 years now, is fighter pilots like myself and like the 40 plus and growing fighter pilots that we have at Single Seat Mindset, we are trained to make decisions at 800 plus miles an hour on a daily basis. And those are very leverageable and learnable decision-making skills that anybody can use in their lives to leverage into a peak performing professions, whether that you're an athlete or a coach or fighter pilot or an architect or what have you. Peak performing professions use a lot of the same decision-making processing skills. However, we have a different edge that we bring to that, and the training lends to that. That's why I started Single Seat Mindset. It was to build the largest online group of fighter pilots that guide action takers in short, impactful steps. And it's really to help guide people to avoid failure, but then to give them a little bit of control of their own success.
And if we had to give a comparison and contrast between a military person who's trained and a civilian, what would be the biggest mindset shift or the most drastic change between the minds?
Yeah, so I was a civilian flight instructor, and I have a commercial pilot license as well as an airline transport pilot certificate, and so I've been in that space. And the big difference that I saw, even instructing and working at a college as a civilian flight instructor, was that the two things that both the civilian and military world do very well, I thought, was that they have a syllabus. Especially if you're at a college in the civilian world, going through a college, there's a syllabus. So there's all the blocking and tackling up front, right? And it's very, hey, we've learned this, let's build on it. So that's the good piece. The big difference between the civilian and military world is the military world is kind of the analogy we use is we're going to feed you with a fire hose. And so there's just so much information and there's a timeline. In the civilian world, you can kind of go at your own pace within reason, right? But there isn't a hard and fast, timeline. I've seen guys take in my case, I went through it fairly quickly. I was pretty driven, but I've seen guys take 5-6 years to get through their training. We just don't have that ability in the military. And so it takes a mindset up front to go, hey, I have this time. I need to drink from this fire hose, learn as much as I can, and then overcome these hurdles. And that's part of the military is figuring out how to adapt and overcome with the timeline that you have, the limited resources that you have, as well as, the things that are thrown at you. And then even a level higher than that is, our business is called single seat mindset, and the single seat theme kind of runs throughout, whether that's the single seat investor book I wrote for my investing company or the single seat wisdom series books. But we're single seat fighter pilots. And there is a whole different level of whatever you would call it, mindset, stress, skills that are learned when it's you. When you are the only person in the airplane and you have a problem and it's staring you in the face and you have to fix it. There's nobody, you can get on the radio and ask for help, but at the end of the day, you're the one that has to move the controls and flip the switches and know what to do. And there's a lot of emergency procedures even where you have 3 seconds or less to make a reaction. And that's what our decisions are based on. So, and it's lightning fast. We're talking when we are taking off, we're very quickly accelerating through 300 miles an hour as we're taking off, just in the runway environment. And if you can imagine, if you've ever been in like a race car on a track, obviously we don't speed on the roads, but like 100 miles an hour is fast in a vehicle. And so just training that mindset and getting used to that pace and then being able to make those decisions, the correct decision, that's trained. And that's kind of empowering for people that they don't want to be a fighter pilot, or they are in a situation or they're in some sort of career field or sport where they need to learn those. It's very learnable. There's very few fighter pilots. In fact, I'm trying to remember, I don't know a single fighter pilot that just nailed it on day one. So the point being is that with our plastic brains, you can learn all those skills. It does take a certain person though to buckle down and to have that mindset to, just dive in and give it a rip, because it's pretty uncomfortable and it's not super fun when you're starting out because you suck. You really do. You suck and you need to just get better. And that's what we're doing through single seat mindset is we are coaching people through that, right? We can't help them make the right action, but we can show them some of the paths. And as of this recording, we have over 40 fighter pilots and we're growing about 20 per year. So we have just such a broad perspective on life.
And you brought up a very unique topic where it's like we compare life to a syllabus in college. I love that idea, actually. I actually talked about it on a recent episode where we are talking about how life is like a syllabus in the sense of this is worth this much for your grade. This is worth that much. If you don't do this, these are the consequences. And oftentimes, I think many people, they get into this mindset of either they have time or they are just lazy and they don't want it. So they want it given to them. So I know right now in the schools, a lot of parents fight for their kids' grades. So the kid learns that, all right, I can have my parent fight for me. But what that teaches that child is that, oh, wait, I can have mom or dad come save me. When in reality, Superman is not going to come save us when it's time for us to fight. When you are in that cockpit and you have to do that work, there's not someone else who's just going to take over like an autopilot. You are the person in charge. You're the person who has to take control. And oftentimes, a lot of people, they give that control away. What is the process of you talking to people about this mindset of gaining control back in your life rather than just allowing the world or the universe to kind of take over?
Yeah. So, single seat mindset, that company grew out of a need during COVID. And we had because I teach at the schoolhouse. So we teach, pilots that need recurrent training or that are coming back that have maybe been out of the cockpit for a year or two. But we also, the majority of our teaching are brand new fighter pilots. So they've never been in a real fighter jet. We're teaching them how to start it, to taxi it around on the ground, how to take off, land, all of that stuff, and then in how to employ it to defend the United States. So to kind of dig a little bit deeper into what you were saying there, the need was COVID had shut us down, put us on different schedules, and fighter pilots, they're a social, lively bunch. And we pass a lot of information. I played baseball up through junior college. I taught downhill skiing. I like really high intensity sports. It's kind of like the locker room. You go fly and you're back in the locker room. And yeah, there's some, maybe some foul language and stuff like that going on. But that's where a lot of the learning comes in, right? Like, hey, and then people are ribbing each other. And that's kind of how our culture learns. It's a very social culture. And the students weren't able to do that. Not only were they having to wear masks and they were locked down and put on different schedules, in that culture, it makes it tough to learn because it's already a tough environment. Now you're adding this much more difficult layer of complexity and the personalities that come out through that and just seeing each other's face. This class was faced with a lot of issues. So what I started doing was once a week, I would send the students no more than a 2-minute message via email. The reason being is what I found too is that if something is too long, I won't read it. And so if it's too long and I'm not reading it, then why send it in the first place? So I made very short messages, and it was simple concepts. These were new guy concepts like, hey, you show up to a fighter squadron and you're the new guy. Here are some things that I messed up when I was new. If you do mess these things up, here's how to dig yourself out of those problems. Here's how to avoid those problems. So it was a very practical message. And it morphed. We called it a bunch of different things for the first 5 or 6 classes. But after class 7 and 8, and we started to kind of go, wow, this is, the students like this and they're using it. I basically built a blog, and then I built a website, and then we automated it through what we call now the Competent Wingman. These are aviation lessons written by fighter pilots, but they are leverageable in really any career field, right? And it's something that we want to give back. Single Seat Mindset, we take all the proceeds from that business and we give it to a children's cancer nonprofit. So this isn't about money for us. It's about guiding people and giving back, right? Because we have some pretty fantastic experiences as fighter pilots, and we want to kind of share that. So that's kind of where it grew, was a need and a pain that existed during COVID. We started giving back there. And then when I automated it online, people started using it from other career fields. And that's where it kind of opened up. And I realized there was at least an intrigue to learn, what is this thing that you guys are doing as fighter pilots, right? And so from there, I had written a couple of low content books at that point. I had written an actual book for my real estate company, like I'd talked about before, that I would hand out. So I had built websites before, I'd run businesses, I had written books. And so we being the instructor pilots, I sat down one day and was like, I wonder how many fighter pilots I know. So I just started writing names out, or typing them out rather. And I got to 189. And I was like, man, I almost know 200 fighter pilots off the top of my head. I wonder if 20 of these guys would sign up and write a chapter in a book. And so that is what kind of birthed this book here, Single Seat Wisdom. And the theme is short, punchy, anecdotal, impactful, and actionable lessons from the lens of a fighter pilot. Again, they're not all aviation related. Some of them are aviation related, but they're very leverageable into other professions, specifically business. One comes to mind. It was written by, he's not only a Top Gun graduate, he's a Top Gun instructor pilot. And he was actually one of my students way back in the day. I won't take any credit for how good he is now, but he wrote a chapter in there that's called The Art of a Fighter Pilot Debrief. And I think that is one of the biggest things that I've learned as a fighter pilot, is how to effectively debrief yourself after something happens. And on the civilian side of the world, that was something that I was lacking as a civilian instructor pilot. I lacked that in sports. And the reason I lacked that is it wasn't a cultural thing. And it's tough and it's painful, especially when somebody's telling you that you suck. But as fighter pilots, that's how we get better. Over the years, I've learned how to tell somebody that they suck, but still for them to learn, right? And that's the art of debrief, but that's also the art of becoming a better coach. You're not being a Santa Claus. You've just learned how to talk to that human that is sitting across from you. And as we know, the syllabus fits 0 people. You have to, as the instructor, you have to fit the syllabus to that person. And that's what makes a really good coach. That's what makes a really good team. And we are, even though we are single seat fighter pilots, we operate as a team almost exclusively. Rarely do we go fly by ourselves. We are operating as a team with multiple other jets in our formation to support a larger objective, just like you would do as a football team or a baseball team or hockey, whatever. And so that was kind of the genesis of it. And that's kind of where it's grown to now, is we have all of these guides or coaches, whatever you want to call them. And the heroes of the story are not us. It's all the people that take this information and they leverage it and use it and apply it to their life. We definitely turn off people like you had talked about before, where the parents done the homework for the kid their whole life. And they've got this victim mindset that they grow into because that's what they've been bred to believe is what you do. We will turn them off immediately because we're just the guide. We're the coach. I can't make you run sprints. I can't make you lift weights. You have to do that. You have to take the action yourself. So hopefully that kind of answered your question. I think the genesis of the whole single seat mindset is important, but just knowing that now we're giving back in multiple different ways, and the information is short, punchy, anecdotal, and it's actionable. You can take this stuff and go, wow, in 10 minutes I can put that into action in my life in one way, shape, or form.
For having that type of mindset, or just kind of going into the many things that you said, great things too, is that when we look at our life, we have the choice, right? We have the option to show up or not show up every single day, right? We wake up, we can be amazing, give 100%, or we can be miserable and give nothing. The pandemic has showed us very clearly where the mindsets of people are. Well, that mindset is that they would rather wait, hope things work out, get back to normal. Let's get back to normal. We have to do this. We have to wait to get back to normal. In my mind, when that was happening, get back to normal, I was like, well, how is taking no action getting back to normal? Shouldn't we be more proactive to get back to normal? Well, we weren't, right? Everyone just said, let's wait. So we developed a waiting mentality. Well, what happened if you had to make a decision in split 3 seconds? You were waiting, right? So that happens very quickly, right? We have fractions of a second to make a choice in our life. And oftentimes people assume they have time. Oh, we'll take it easy. We'll do tomorrow, right? So they get into this stagnant way of being where they're just like, okay, I'm just going to go at a slow roll, but you're not going to take off if you're going 10 miles an hour, right? You have to get some speed to get liftoff, right? And oftentimes people are just like, well, I'm just going to take it slow, take it slow, take it slow. And then they wonder why their life doesn't surmount to anything. I love like some of the analogies that you're using of like the wisdom, right? Just being in that seat or being a part of a unit. All of that is very important to our growth and our success. Yes, you don't need a coach or you don't need an instructor or a teacher to be amazing, but it's helpful. And it does show you exactly where you are. Even when I began teaching, I wasn't like amazing. Same thing with coaching. I wasn't amazing. I had to learn the process. I was fortunate enough that I had great teachers, instructors, mentors to help me along the way. And it made me very aware of my shortcomings and then made me aware of I'm a lifetime learner. And I think sometimes people, they just say, well, this is what I know. This is what I don't know. And then everything else they don't know, they just don't pay attention to. They are just so aware of, okay, I don't know that I know this. And they're know-it-all. And it's very easy today is, oh, something's wrong. Let me go to Google. Let me go to YouTube. And they look for a cure. They look for a fix. But when your life is on the line and you have to figure out things for yourself, that's a different type of mindset, because oftentimes we have the luxury of time, the most of us, right? Yeah. But in reality, we don't have the luxury of time, because if we keep waiting for tomorrow, we keep waiting for that moment, that contingency to happen, guess what happens? We never take action. I think for like having that single seat type of mindset is that you are in charge. You have to take the action. The discipline between someone who's just a civilian or someone who's in the military is drastic, because they have to become regimented. They learn the habits. Once they go down that process, oh, this works for me, this is the results, versus I wake up, I go to 9 to 5, I come home, I do it again. We have a different type of day each and every day. So you might be doing these drills one day, and then the next day you're working on this type of flight simulator, or you're just working on, different regiments that are with training in the flight school. I'm not too familiar with like the agenda for flight school, but I'm sure there's going to be a curriculum almost in the sense of we need to learn these things, the basics of flight school, the basics of flying, the basics of being a fighter pilot. So all of that right there is giving you the foundation to be successful, because you just don't have fighter pilots crashing every single day. You just don't see that in the news. I'm sure there's cases where people crash and there's incidents and accidents, but you train for that not to happen. Versus in life, people don't train for things to happen and then they wonder why they have a shitty life. So it's amazing to me how many people don't take the action that they're supposed to be, that they don't be aware that they are the pilot, that they are the person that can change everything. And it's not that they have to do it themselves. They can have an instructor, they can have a coach, they can have someone that's saying, hey, do this instead, because this is going to be better. And you might not have even known it, because we have a lot of blind spots as people. Until you're made aware of it, you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And then you learn it and you become better. And I think the idea of becoming better is something that many people have to regain, or that mentality people have to get back in their life. How can I be better? How can I grow? And then from there, they can start to make the changes that will help them get to a better tomorrow. So I wanted to kind of ask you, what kind of led you to being a fighter pilot? And then that type of mindset of, okay, I want to be a fighter pilot. I want to do this. I want to be a business owner, to kind of going your process of where you were to how you are today.
I think there was a post that I saw of yours that you were quoting somebody that had something to do with, don't look at the entire staircase, just take the first step, or something along those lines. I'm butchering the quote. Everybody can see that, right? This huge staircase. And if you maybe haven't worked out and you're supposed to sprint up this staircase, well, you got to take the first step. And that may mean today you do 5 steps, and then tomorrow you do 6, or whatever it happens to be. You start to see a lot of trends in books and self-help books and all this kind of stuff. But one of the main word that I always come back to is action. Action is what, unfortunately, we live in a world where people go to college and they go to school and they get all this knowledge, but they don't practically apply it because it's not taught. And you can't teach that. That requires action, and human beings need to take action, and we need to fail and we need to succeed in order to figure out, hey, that worked, it didn't. And so I think knowing that action is a very powerful concept, and what that requires is some discipline on behalf of the person taking that action to wake up early or go to bed early, right? Don't binge watch Netflix. There's certain things that you can just stop doing in your life that will automatically just put you ahead of many of your peers, or even people that are well ahead of you. But the action mindset behind it, in my case, I don't think I was born, Michael, to be a fighter pilot. I think it was learned. I kind of alluded to that earlier, and that can be a very powerful concept to a lot of young kids that have never been given permission to do that. And as I grew up, I got the itch to fly. I had that. I liked air shows and airplanes, and I wanted to have the opportunity to do that, which is why I stayed in sports, because that kept me out of drugs and some of the things that you can do in that 10 to 18-year-old time frame in your life where you really shoot yourself in the foot. So I did that stuff, and I wasn't perfect, but I kept my nose clean, so to speak. And I was taking certain steps. And by 7 years old, I built a little plastic fighter jet model with my dad on the kitchen table. I still have it today. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. And fighter jets are cool. And then at 12, I'm standing on the flight deck of Alaska Airlines, like a commercial airliner, and they're doing engine runs. And I'm there with my uncle, who's a mechanic. And I'm like, well, he's a mechanic, I can be a mechanic. And so I had signed up at 16 to start mechanic school. And at the same time, one of the counselors gave me a flyer to check out a flight school. And I went down there and I'm like, that's what I've always wanted to do. And granted, it didn't just roll out like that, but I was taking action, right? I was not doing certain activities that were going to damage my future, but then I was also taking action and moving forward. And I think, there's a certain mindset that you can see as a coach in somebody in front of you. And you can go, man, that kid has some potential. But there's a couple other things that are important. You alluded to it, having a coach or a guide. It's not mandatory, but it does help. But the third step, so there's mindset, coach or guide, and then action. You have to take action. And I think that was something that really propelled me ahead of my peers. And the coach and the guide that I needed in my life was not there when I started, but I just started. I started taking those steps. And when you probably see it all the time. I see it all the time. When I see somebody, you'll know the talkers, and the talkers are just like, dude, I don't have time for you because you're just a big talker and you post on social media, but there's no substance below your digital presence online. But then you also see other people they'll talk a little bit and then they disappear. When they come back, you're like, holy smokes, you've been hustling, right? And those are the people that I'm willing to go, dude, you've got what it takes. If you want some coaching or if you want some feedback, I've been down that path, or I've done these things, and here's some, hurdles along the way type of thing. And I'm willing to help those people any day of the week. But the people that just talk and they don't take action, we all have them in our lives. Oh, you're just so lucky. And I'm like, well, the way that I define luck is timing and hard work. And so if you're taking action, the hard work piece, then the timing eventually lines up. Unless you're just the most unlucky person on the face of the planet, eventually your actions are going to bring people out that will help you get to the finish line, that will coach you. But if you don't do that and you slide back into this victim mindset, or even worse, you become this villain and you're like bringing other people down, that doesn't help. So that's what kind of the trend that I saw throughout my life, kind of circling back to what you had said before, is I wasn't born to be a fighter pilot. They're definitely learned experiences. They're learned one step at a time. There are times where in my life I was at a full sprint to where I thought I was going to die. And you just got to squeeze that last little bit out to cross the finish line and then look back and go, wow, I'm really glad that I did that. And I'm glad that I didn't give up and I made it. And now I'm on to the next thing and then the next thing, right? And then you start to leverage as you gain those new perspectives and you gain those new tools, you start to see the world in a different way, which is how I open my eyes to the business world and to real estate and to writing books and to building websites and to coaching people. Never did I grow up, Michael, thinking I was going to be a fighter pilot. Fighter pilots don't build websites and write books. We don't do this stuff. We fly for the airlines or we do something else or we coach other pilots, but we don't go down this path. And it's been super uncomfortable, but the feedback that we're getting and the help that we're providing to children going through cancer treatments and the fighter pilots that I know that are coming out of the woodwork going, dude, I've always wanted to be an author. I didn't know how to start. And I'm like, I can do all the nitty gritty stuff that's not fun to get your story published and to get it out there. All you got to do is write it type of thing. But to answer your question, it's just one step at a time. You know, you have an intentionality to your day. You have intentionality to your week. You maybe have some vague vision of your future and you just take it one day at a time and you just do. I ran into a guy at a real estate investment, something or another, and you'll know, you bump into these people and you're like, well, that dude has money and he's got it all figured out, right? And I was just like, what are kind of your things? And he goes, well, every morning I wake up, I write 8 things down and I do 3 of them. And I was like, that's super powerful. So if you're not as aggressive minded to take that kind of action, do one thing a day, have some intention, do one thing a week. And at least you'll have 52 things that you wouldn't have done throughout the year because you did one thing a week, right? So I think that's the biggest message that I have to give as I look back when I was at a full sprint through my early years. And yes, I could have done things better or differently. We all can. But just taking those short, impactful steps, learning from them, realizing you're going to fail. Failure is not you as a person. It's the event that happened. So just pick yourself back up, learn from it, debrief yourself, and move on to the next thing.
The idea of what we're kind of talking about right now is kind of like teetering on the concept of failure. It's where people don't want to fail. People love to stay in their comfort zone. I mean, heck, if I could stay in my comfort zone, I would, but my mind won't allow me. I said, all right, this is getting too comfortable. That's why if I go on vacation on day 3, I'm getting stir crazy. I'm like, I'm going to do something, whether it's phone calls, I'm going to be talking to people on the beach. I'm going to do something where I'm going to work. It's just the way I condition myself. Oftentimes people condition themselves to be still. All right. Yeah. I'm grounded. I'm not in the air. Right. So they're just on standby, but they're not taking flight. And what those people need to do is they need to start to realize what can they do, right? That action aspect where it doesn't have to be crazy actions, where it's like, okay, you want to write a book. Okay, well, you don't have to write a book today, right? Maybe write a sentence, right? Maybe do a journal entry, a blog, right? Something, start that process. And I think oftentimes people fail to understand the power of starting the process. If you want to get in shape, it's not like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym, get a gym membership, get a trainer. That is helpful, but maybe you should just start walking around the block. Get in that type of mindset. Do that for 5 days out of the week. All right, you exercise for 5 days. Do that for 3 months. If you can maintain that, it's not a hard thing to do, just walking around the block. Maybe if you have kids, or if you have grandparents, you want to take them out for a walk, keep them exercise, things like that, get some sun. That's all great things. But you start that habit. And when you have that habit, then you can start to figure out, okay, these are things that I can be doing, right? Kind of going back to that example of the real estate guy who says, write down 8 things, do 3. You don't have to do everything on your list, but you do have to do something. And oftentimes people say, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that, but they don't do anything. It's just taking that small step, do something. And oftentimes people choose to do nothing. And what that does is it creates a void where it's just like, okay, now I have to overcome this laziness. Well, if you weren't lazy in the beginning and you kept going, that momentum will help propel you and push you, similar to how if you're on the treadmill or running on track, it doesn't necessarily matter where you're running. I'm going to explain it in the way you're going to learn, and then I'm going to explain it in the way everyone else is going to learn it. When you're about to die, right? You're like, I'm going to die if I keep on going, but you keep going and you don't die. You're like, oh, I'm glad I'm glad I finished. All right. For regular people, when you're running, your brain is going to start to set off warning signals, right? It's that fight or flight type of thing. You're kind of going into your energy reserves in the sense of your comfort zone is now getting passed. So you're now pushing yourself and your body has to find energy somewhere, whether you have a good source of fuel and your body knows how to get it very quickly from fat stores, if you have good glucose levels that can pull from there. Now, you're running. So your brain is sending off all these signals saying, hey, stop them. You're going to die, because your brain doesn't understand that you're exercising or that you are running because, you want to catch the bus, right? You have to realize that, okay, this warning signal that the brain is giving me is just the DNA that we have learned from the million years of our being. Before, there was a time when we had to fight for our survival. We had saber-toothed tigers coming out of bushes trying to eat us. We don't have that today. We live in plush homes. We have a very plush life. We have a roof over our head. If you're hot, turn on the AC. If you're cold, turn on the heat, get a blanket. Before, you had to start your own fire, procure your own food. We live in a very easy society. So the brain has kind of diminished in the sense of the work it has to do. But when you start to challenge it and you give that body the fatigue that is good to have, right? So we're giving our body that stress. Then we're at that point of, all right, we have a choice to stop or to keep on pushing to see our threshold. I always tell people, in order to understand mindset, go on the treadmill, run for 7 minutes. If you are not athletic, around 3 to 4 minutes, you're going to start to get winded. Your brain is going to start to say, hey, stop, dummy. You're losing your mind. Your heart's going to be beating crazy. You're going to feel like you're going to throw up. All of these nasty things that we don't want to happen, especially on the treadmill. We think we're going to fall and we're going to die. I challenge you. As soon as your brain starts to set off those warning signals, keep going. Go for a minute. Maybe go for 3 minutes, right? I always recommend 3. Go for an extra minute. As soon as you're going to hit the stop button, you pull your hand back and you say no, and you run for the extra minute. Eventually, you're going to learn you didn't die and that you're powerful. So we learn that we are powerful as people. And oftentimes people just assume like, okay, I got to some dangerous point. My brain is saying, hey, stop, dummy, stop. But the moment you stop, that's the moment you stop growing. So we have to get past that threshold. And it's that action. It was that willingness to learn. It's easier when you have a coach because a coach can push you. A coach can say, hey, we're not stopping, keep on going. Versus if we are left to our own accord, I feel uncomfortable, I'm going to stop. But if you don't stop, what happens after that is that you learn, oh, wow, I was able to accomplish that. So you were afraid to get past that threshold before, in a sense, because your body doesn't understand the fear. Same thing in business. You don't want to start a business because you're afraid of what other people would think or that you don't know what to do. So we have that fear in anything, relationships, career, personal development. We have that fear we give ourselves because we don't push ourselves. But if you put yourself in a situation where you're the pilot, where you're the person who has to make these split 3-second decisions, then, only then, you can say, all right, I'm going to make the change. That's why 1% of people succeed wildly and everyone else doesn't, because they don't take that aspect of life right there. I can make the changes. I just have to be courageous. And oftentimes people don't want to dive into that mentality, getting to that threshold of, I'm going to die if I take another step. You're not going to die if you take another step. It's a good probability you're going to survive and you can tell your story. But we have that mentality of, if I take another step, I'm not going to make it. Being uncomfortable is one of the things that we have to look for every single day. And I love being uncomfortable, especially in the gym, because it shows that I'm growing. And yes, it sucks. It sucks. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, yeah, I love that feeling where, I'm on the Stairmaster and I'm doing 15,000 steps and then my heart's about to come out of my chest. I'm about to vomit. No, it doesn't feel good. I understand. But after, that feels amazing. During the process, it doesn't feel good. But after, I feel amazing. I'm so happy I did it. And when we look back at our life and all the paths that we can take, from when you were a young boy and you were on the tarmac and you were seeing all these pilots, your uncle's a mechanic, I believe you said uncle, and we're learning, oh, I can do this, I can do that. And you test the waters. And then you finally realize you come to a point, oh, I can do this. But if you weren't on that tarmac, if you didn't have an uncle who was a mechanic, would you be on that same path? Maybe, maybe not, right? So all of the paths, all the things that we have in our life lead us to where we are. Just because you had a circumstance or you had a rough patch in your life doesn't mean you can't make changes. I understand that life's not easy, but it doesn't have to be easy for you to be successful, for you to be fulfilled, for you to be happy. You just have to understand yourself. And oftentimes, I think people don't understand themselves. Getting back to the camaraderie of what we talked about early on, where you're saying everyone comes in the locker room, we're all social beings. That camaraderie, right? Working together, talking, sharing that wisdom, the single seat mindset, the single seat wisdom, sharing what we've learned to instill onto others, to be open, a community base. We have lost that as a society.
Yeah.
Where if we can get together again, bring our knowledge, bring our wisdom, bring our mission for the better of society, for the better of ourselves, we can make huge changes. And I love the work that you do with your companies, especially giving back to kids or like fighting cancer, things like that. You have a cause, you have a purpose, and that right there is going to drive you every single day. I'm making a difference, not in just these fighter pilots' lives or the people who read the books, but also the people who are fighting an illness that sucks, right?
Yeah.
We can do amazing things. It's just sometimes I think a lot of people, we stop ourselves from doing them.
Couldn't agree with you more. Kind of makes me think of, I think it was Nelson Mandela, that he had a quote that was something along the lines of the same one that like Tony Robbins talks about, where failure is, I think, an event, not a person. And that might be Nelson Mandela. I might be getting him confused, but then, Nelson Mandela, I think he also said something along the lines of, I have winning or learning experiences. And what that alludes to is that I don't fail as a person. All right. I learn, which hurts, right? Because then you find out you suck, or I win. And you kind of hit the nail on the head there is purpose. How do you live a purposeful life? And it starts with action, right? Because action creates movement, and movement creates meaning. And as you have meaning in your life, you then start to feel the purpose that you have, the purpose within your own life, your friend's life, your wife, kids, your circles, your church, whatever it happens to be, is that action creates movement, right? And then now you have some more meaning. And with more action, you get more purpose, more meaning, and it just grows on itself. You get this traction in your life. The one thing I would caution is if you are a big action taker like you or me, right? There is a trap, and the trap is falling into being a workaholic, right? So if you are on that side of the pendulum, like myself, I've had some pretty big crashes, mental crashes throughout my life. They were due to deployments and war and other things, as well as life and business and family and extended family, just stuff that people deal with. And if you're a workaholic and your plate is so full that any additional thing that you pile onto it, everything comes tumbling down, that also is not sustainable. We're unbalanced people. People talk about seeking balance. That doesn't exist. We're human. We're flawed. So I think the important piece that I was picking out from what you were saying is, even earlier before we started recording, you said your phone is on during working hours, but then it's off. And you have those things that you've learned, because if you're just on all the time, well, then you fall apart. So learning that piece, the one end of the pendulum where you're sitting on the couch, binge watching Netflix and doing nothing. Okay, that's one end. The other end is that you're doing so much, you become this workaholic that you lose your mind. Well, we're not going to be perfectly in the middle all the time. So how do we do that? Well, if you are towards our end of the pendulum, then you need to have some things that you do in your life that kind of give you some time to relax and recoup, right? You said 3 days on the beach. Well, what gives you purpose and meaning is movement and action in your life. And for you, you can still chill on the beach, but maybe talk to somebody. Maybe that's how you define a little bit more purpose. You give back. Maybe your plan that day is to cook 3 amazing meals for your family, right? And that gives you purpose during your day, but you have a plan if that's how you need to go. And then the other side of the pendulum is, okay, I'm sitting on the couch, I'm ripping through a 12-pack of beer, doing nothing, right? Well, that's not helping either. So I think the trap that I've fallen into many times in my life was that workaholism. And then just kind of defining, as you put those 8 things on your list, what are you doing when you trim it down to 3? You're saying no to the things that aren't good for the intentionality that week. They aren't good for you. And then maybe they're not advancing the puck down the ice. So that allows you to see all of the things that you could do, but then to go, you know what? I think the top thing is this. I need to do that. And then maybe 1 or 2 other things. And then just go, okay, I think those 3 things, that allows you to kind of focus your intentions through that week, through that day. And then you'll start to see those little wins happening. And it's kind of maybe like a flywheel on a car, right? It's pretty heavy, but once you get it moving and the starter on the engine gets moving and it gets warmed up, you get some of that momentum, and that creates more purpose, creates more meaning. You take more action, and it just builds on itself. Because I don't know, Michael, I haven't met any business owner that was just like, yeah, I had this good idea, and then one day I was just like a billionaire, right? It doesn't work that way. But a lot of people on the social medias, they get trapped into that and go, wow, they're an influencer. I would be willing to bet that a person that is an influencer and making a lot of money doing that does not get on social media and cruise social media. They're influencing, they're doing things, they're taking action to build their brand. They're establishing their own authority for whatever niche that they're in. It takes a lot of work. But the people that don't see that, they just sit back and go, oh man, I'm just going to like post a couple pictures holding a Monster can and lifting some weights. And like, why aren't people following me? And it's like, well, dude, that sucks. I can do that. That's easy. So I think kind of the big thing is ask yourself why at the end. So you go, hey, this is my vision for life, but why? And just dig through that why until you go, okay, my intent is this. I'm going to fail along the way. I'm going to take action. I'm going to create movement and purpose and meaning in my life, but why? And those will help you avoid the crashes, because the times that I've crashed, my why wasn't clear. And I got to the end. I was like, boom, I'm successful. And then crash, because my story ended. And my story wasn't a continuous story. It was a inward, I'm successful story, but it didn't create significance outside of me. And so I think that's kind of an important thing that I learned, to keep your story going, because people like stories. I like stories. So let's keep this story going and go, hey, what's the depth behind that? All right, this creates some why in my life, and that creates more meaning. And then when I'm done with this story, there's a story already going. It's already creating more meaning, and it's outside of myself.
And our story is not over either. With the podcast, we are always moving. We're always bringing on wonderful guests, coaches, founders that have something to say about mindset. This right here is just another chapter in the book where you learn the wisdom that you've gained from this episode from Dominic. Learning that and applying it to your life, you're going to start to see changes. It might not be overnight, but if you just implement it as a process and create that habit of saying, all right, I'm going to take actionable steps to my purpose, my future. Well, if you need some help, of course, get a coach, get a guide, get someone to help you along the way. If you do it by yourself, it is going to be a lonely process. It is going to be trial and error, and all of that can be mitigated. And I know the work that Dominic does, even though he says he works with fighter pilots, he does work with other people. So I don't want other people to think, oh, he only works with fighter pilots. That's not the case. He works with people who want to get into that seat of being that strong individual, that strong pilot who has to make these 3-second decisions, who want to take the steps needed to have a successful mission rather than a failure every single day. We are going to have failures in our life. There's no way around it, but those help you grow. So we shouldn't necessarily be afraid of our failures. We should look for them as a stepping stone to get us to something better. We can look at our social medias, at all these people who do wonderful things and have all these amazing results. But when we look at them, that doesn't have to be us, because what we can do is so much more than what they have attained, because our path is different. So the path that you're on, you have to choose it. You go any way you want. You can be better in the sense of if you're looking at an influencer and you have that can of Monster in your hand, you can be bigger than them. But if you give yourself that comparison of, oh, they have this, I want to be like them, we always fall short. So when we say we are this and we aim for us, we do so much better. So if you're in the process of wanting to change your life, wanting to change your mindset, I know the work that Dominic does at Single Seat Mindset is going to be able to transition or correlate into the civilian life if you're not in the military, and just look at the different aspects, the different dynamics, and then take away the little nuggets that you get, because everyone's going to hear an episode and hear something different. Everyone's going to read a book and get something different out of it. But what you gain from it is that step that you're going to take to the next level. So if I can from you, Dominic, can you share with us any last words and then share how people can find you?
Yeah. So I think the big thing here is that Coach Lombardi of the Green Bay Packers, he said, confidence is contagious and so is lack of confidence. And kind of I leveraged that saying into action is contagious and so is lack of action. You know, take those steps like you talked about. I've taken the step to help. I can inspire you to action, but you have to take the action. And we do that at singleseatmindset.com. If your listeners have listened up to this point and you live in the United States, they can go to singleseatmindset.com/podcast guest, all one word. And the first 3 guests of yours, if they throw their name, an email address in there, I will send them, no strings attached, a free copy of Single Seat Wisdom, hard copy. So it's not going to be a digital one. I'm not going to spam your email. It's going to be an actual book. You can kind of see what it's all about there. But singleseatmindset.com. You can contact me there. That's kind of our launch pad, if you will. That's got all our resources that are just constantly growing as we move forward.
All right, perfect. I will put your website in there, all your social media links. I won't put that /podcast guest. They have to find that, right? So I'm just not going to give them free stuff, right? You have to earn what you get here.
Yeah.
All right, Dominic, I want to thank you so much for coming on, sharing a little bit of your wisdom today, and being a wonderful guest. I loved our conversation. It was a smooth flow of conversation. It was unique. It was uplifting. I know many people who listen to this are going to be inspired to take action.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate your time.
Of course. All right, everyone. I would like to thank you for watching the episode with Dominic Teich and myself. Of course, I encourage you to reach out to him to inquire about the work he does, to let him know that he's doing wonderful work, because the work he is doing is going to be transformational in the sense of he can impact the world in a positive light. And the more people that get on board with that idea or that mission aspect is going to help him with his mission, help change the world. And if you know anything about my mission, is to impact 2 billion people. And that mission alone is, it's a lot, right? When we look at this 2 billion, let's think of $2 billion. That's a lot of money. 2 billion lives, that's a lot of lives. In the whole scheme of something, or the scheme of the world, there's only 25% of people. So there's 75% of people that I won't have an impact on. But those 25% people that I do, it creates that ripple. And eventually it's going to be 50%, maybe 60%, right? We're going up there where people are going to learn from the podcast. They're going to learn from books, from articles, from other guests. And then they make those changes that they need to make. Because sometimes we reach out our hand and we're hoping that someone comes saves us. Oftentimes we have to be our own rescuer, but sometimes there's going to be someone who comes in and they say, hey, we can do this. Grab my hand and let's go together. That could be a coach. That could be a mentor. That could be a guide, where they're helping you. They're guiding you to the right path. They're guiding you to where you want to be. They're helping you get there. And you don't have to do it alone. The idea of mindset and that journey of life is going to be unique to you. And the idea of that you have a setup of a unique DNA that cannot be replicated. You can do things that people can't, because the perceptions that you have in the world are going to be unique. And you can make the changes today for your tomorrow. The problem is many people try to make the changes tomorrow. We have to just change our mindset, change how we adjust, change how we move, change how we attack. So if you are someone who has been on the sidelines and have been afraid to take action, figure out, what do you need to do? If you have to write a list, if you have to get a coach, a mentor, someone that's going to help you, if you have to keep listening to episodes of Coaching in Session, of different podcasts of personal development, figure out what you need in order to grow. Figure out what you need in order to make the changes that you know you need to make. Oftentimes, we're going to be the obstacle that stops us from taking action, our mind. We build a wall in our mind and we say, we can't do this, we can't do that, we shouldn't do this, or I would like to do this. And we wait, we procrastinate. But we can't wait, we can't procrastinate. We can't wait for something to happen. We can't wait for someone else to fix something that's broken. We need to become that person. We need to become the person that directs our life for how we want, that directs our life to how it should be, rather than what we're given. And oftentimes we're given a bad hand. We're given a life that we don't necessarily love or we're passionate about. But if you want some passion, if you want a good life, figure out what is needed for that to happen. You can start at revenconcepts.com. You can head over to Dominic's website, Single Seat Mindset, figuring that out, get his book, finding the golden nuggets in there, and then growing from what you learn. Because we can attain a bunch of knowledge in our life, but wisdom is going to be one of those things that we should be thriving for. Because if we can attain enough wisdom, then we will eventually claim the key to our success. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, you can email me, coachinginsession@gmail.com, and I will see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone, take care.